So excited to come back to have our conversation, our Trust Your Gut conversation. I'm Erin Trent Johnson, and I am here with Dr. Antonio Aragona, Doctor of Ayurvedic Medicine, who I am so happy to call Dr. A. And we are talking today about Ayurveda and health and the definition of health in Ayurvedic medicine. And so I'm excited to have Dr. A kick us off, get us started with our conversation.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here again. And yeah, so what we're going to start off with basically, and then we will unravel from. We'll always leave many questions because it always leaves a lot of questions and answer some things, but it's this repetitive cycle of increasing more awareness, and increasing more awareness always draws more questions. And so coming into the context of its seasonal transition for Ayurvedic medicine, where we're doing cleanse protocols, purging protocols to prepare the body for the next season, but also discard any excess accumulations from the previous season. And I go as far as saying basically any kind of properly done and properly instructed, facilitated cleanse protocol will address karmic components, karmic actions, karmic accumulations, um, you know, all of these things. So it's not just that simple in Ayurveda. It's not just like, let's just do a fast for today. This is not, a proper cleanse protocol. It's a much involved process that can vary per person. And so starting first from the macro component before we go to the micro component of the present moment and season, there was a concept in Ayurveda or principle called Loka Purusha Samya, which is basically the understanding that as is the world, so is the being, the human being, and as is the human being, so is the world. Conventional New Age like spirituality uses as above, so below. So Loka Purusha Samya is basically that, and it's understanding how we're all connected to the entire world, and world is connected to the cosmos in the body of the cosmos, in the body of the universe. And so knowing that what is in the world is also in the body, and what is in the body is in the world, and there's a direct correlation to all the parts, and the parts are innumerable. We cannot count all the parts in the body or in the universe, and we cannot. This is innumerable. This is what's understood in Ayurveda. And understanding our relationship to the environment and things like that, and the karmic actions that bring us to the present moment. Ayurveda has a much more a deeper understanding of what karma is and many facets of karma. It's not very easy to just throw the word karma around, because saying it um, from the Ayurvedic standpoint, yogic standpoint, Jyotish standpoint, which is the Vedic astrology, tantric standpoint, like all the major Vedic sciences have an understanding of karma. It's not a diluted version of punishment and suffering and all these things. It's much more involved than what the current dilution is. And so for the understanding of the body and its formation, so embryological formation, in Ayurveda, we call it the fetus, which is the garba. Um, we understand from the Ayurvedic clinical perspective what happens that is part of the formation of the fetus for the fetus to be uh, a living being entity. And with that component, there's a sort of configuration of 6 pieces that come together, 6 components for the genesis, growth, and development of a fetus. Um, One is the matruja, or the mother's contribution,
Mhm.
and that would be things like, the X chromosome. It would be things like skin and blood plasma, liver, spleen, like soft tissues of the body, stomach, intestines, these kind of things. Um, so we understand that there's a mother contribution. There's a pitraja, which is the paternal contribution. So that's more like the harder pieces of bones, teeth, nails, arteries, veins, reproductive fluid, even hair and nails, things like that. So we know there's a father, paternal, energetic, physiological piece that's going into it. There's the Atmaja, which is spiritual. So from that standpoint, it's like the essence, the entity, the being, the soul, the consciousness, the spark that comes in. Because without the spark, there is nothing. The body cannot
Hmm.
come into existence without the spark. In modern science and laboratory examination, when you take the sperm and inject it into the ovum, and we watch the process, there's an initial spark you can see in a microscope that occurs. It's like an electrical piece, and then the mitosis and meiosis and all these things start to, unfold. Um, and so we understand what's the spark. The spark is the consciousness, but what is within the spark is consciousness,
Mm.
which is like a zip file of, you know, life at its most basic fundamental essence, where, all the yogis and Buddhists and Tibetan monks and tribal men meditate and connect to with this deeper place of wisdom and consciousness and awareness and being and non-being. All that stuff is in this Atmaja component that's automatically there. Then Satmyaja, which is basically like the suitable conditions and environment. So what the mother and father consist of as far as their health, their well-being, their mind state, where they're living, the geography, all of these things are being configured. Um, so it's that aspect of the creation of complete health that Satmya is in part important for. And it's like the proper, wholesome um, uh, environmental components that contribute towards the wellness and formation of the Garbha. Rasaja, which is nourishment. So what is the actual nourishment that both parents take? Because, healthy sperm, healthy ovum will increase the likelihood of healthy formation of a baby.
Hmm.
And that goes very extensively. So even in Ayurveda, if someone's considering proper pregnancy process, both parents must absolutely be on board for the optimal state of health for a child to form. So we all think we're our parents completely healthy. And what current conditions do we have in our state of being right now for ourselves that, we can look back and go, what was mom doing? What was dad doing? What were they thinking and feeling and all these things?
Well, could I
And
pause you and ask a question for a
yeah,
second?
yeah,
Because, you said something that really struck me around both parents have to be on board. Both parents, right? And so that um, not only consent, but desire and commitment are a part of the formation of health. And so even before we talk about their bodies being healthy, um right, and I guess that is a part of what makes them healthy, right? The ability to consent to and desire and commit to this life coming into the world. I've just had to pause on that because I think that's those conditions are challenging um with and in relationship to all that's going on in the world, what's
yeah.
going on in their lives that would allow for those factors to be possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's the world's not getting easier, right?
Hmm.
So if we base that even just on the simplistic introduction of the loka Purusha Samya,
Hmm.
it's like as is the human being, as the world is the human being, and they will continue to parallel each other in a very synchronistic, sort of like integrated way. And as we're evolving with the technologies and the exposure to all the different elemental contaminants, like what is the likelihood of that increased quality of sperm and ovum today versus based historically, when we look at like things 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago, qualities are very different in so many ways. And there's a momentum now that, just the studies I've been looking at lately, they're finding and like cadaver dissections and other things, um, plastics in semen, plastics in the ovum, plastics in the cellular structure of a person's skin membranes. Like they're finding all these plastics, these forever plastics in everybody. No one,
Mhm.
I don't think there is anyone that has none of this, unless you were really in that remote tribe somewhere in any part of the deep forests of some part of the world that have not had technological, introduction, right?
Yes.
But even then, it's like the cleanliness, the purity of the elements are getting lesser and lesser with each year, which means that even those remote places that were once remote, untouched by these things, are being touched because they're breathing the air that we are all breathing. And all the
Mhm.
rainwater that's traveling and going around to the different, places on the planet, all of it, all the elements, so then that rainwater carries something that embeds it into the soil, no matter where you are. And then that soil is slowly getting contaminated. Of course, the increased concentrations of contamination happen the higher the concentration of the field that you're in. So in cities and things like that. And, so it's all very true. And, it can be almost depressing, but this is where Ayurveda comes in. It says there are some things that we can do, so when parents are on board, both, in Western medicine and allopathy, if a mother is going for IVF or something like that, or generally they're consulting with their OBGYN and they're interested in pregnancy, because I say there as the couple,
Mhm.
um, male and female that are producing the couple, they're producing the baby. Um, the OBGYN may have enough knowledge to say, so for now, if you're trying for pregnancy, maybe stop the smoking, stop your drinking, wait at the proper cycles of the month to know when you're at the highest point of this versus this with hormones and chemistry for both dad, and dad should retain some of his semen and not, expend it. And like, that's a version of like how they're trying to like create a optimal chance of the baby being produced. Ayurveda goes to the much deeper level because it does with everything. It's like, ah, that's all true. And what is the diet like? What is the sleep pattern like? And did we have to do panchakarma, or like a really aggressive Ayurvedic protocol for purging, purification of the tissues to increase that, then strengthen the body. And then from a place of strength, do we produce a strong child? You know, and that Western medicine doesn't know that yet, which is fine. That's
Mhm.
why Ayurveda is Ayurveda and Western medicine is why Western medicine, and that's good. So it's looking at that simplicity, but it's not. It's very complex, and most people just are. I'm in the moment, and I just want to do this. Yeah, well, then that would be the essence of consciousness that is embedded in this sort of this equation of the six factors that create the fetus. And so when we wonder why certain babies or children or adolescents or childhood, or adults have certain features, it's because of this. And we started at the basic building blocks, right? And that's the nourishment. And so that's rasaja, and that's, five. And then number six is sattvaja, which is the manifestations of the mind. It's the psychology. And so what is the state of the mind, of the both parents having this child? Wanting to have the children. What is the consciousness? Are they pleasant, calm people, or are they anxious and depressed, or all these kind of things? Because that will all be embedded and increase the likelihood of what that child's going to exhibit in their formation, right? Because then then dad does his job and the sperm meets the ovum, and then that ovum is now being cultivated by the mother for 9 months. So
Yes.
a lot of emphasis is put on the mother at that point. Dad had the easy job, but he would have had more work to do if he was actually purifying his body, cleansing, strengthening his mind, addressing any underlying mental health issues and physical issues to bring it to the more optimal place. And then mother gets that implant of the seed, and then it's now her duty to carry more of the weight, which I think historically for a lot of the ancient systems of medicine or older system of medicines, they put a lot of weight, which translates into certain traditions as the guilt and the blame piece on the mother.
Yes.
And
Yes.
meanwhile, just because the father's energy or that energy was implanted into the ovum doesn't mean he's still not responsible for how he acts around the woman, how he acts around in the environment in his own being. He's for those 9 months has to be continued. It's
This is helpful, but what comes up for me though is just what you talked about. It is the shame and the blame. So I think for a mother who is anxious or who and I can speak for myself, right? Who's uh control orientation to hyper to the point of maybe sometimes hypervigilance, right? Wanting to create the most safe possible healthy environment is taking that kind of health to the extreme. And I can say this with compassion for myself now. And also without that compassion, I could also be riddled with shame about how my anxiety drove my pregnancy, like what was happening for me in my body mind while this child is growing. And you know, I am very mindful of the patterns that, I had or I enacted when I was, when I was pregnant with my child. And I tried to control every single aspect of my pregnancy, and then also birthing. My child was breech, and I wanted to ensure that I was able to have a cesarean because I wanted to control and have a natural
Mhm.
childbirth. And, um, the anxiety that drove me in trying to get my child to flip, in trying to change the circumstances
Mhm.
of her birthing was so intense, that I know it shaped the experience of birthing, and it also shaped my postpartum experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I had pretty intense postpartum anxiety and depression. Um, and I'm just curious, with the way that Western medicine, right, views Western allopathic medicine views um, the preparation for birthing, the pregnancy, and then also the postpartum experience. It's like, well, we're going to figure out what's the right medication, what's the right, medication to support your mental health.
Mhm.
That's the answer. And also, there's a lot of shame, right,
Mhm.
that is embodied and then also lives within the cultural zeitgeist
Mhm.
around how we talk about what's happening.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, you know, what Ayurveda would have to, like, what Ayurveda says about the support that a mother needs when there's awareness
Mhm.
of these mental health experiences of the mind, of the consciousness, of the body that's carrying this growing child.
Yeah, I mean, Ayurveda is always about what is the environment, what is the support system that's in place to support any wellness of any person, just by default, right? This is like already implanted in Ayurvedic wisdom and science, like how are you living your life and lifestyle? So, Ahar and Vihar in Ayurveda are the two main places where diseases can be created or eliminated or prevented. And Ahar is diet and lifestyle is Vihar. And so it's a daily practice. It's a daily process. It's like who do you surround yourself with? What do you do for your daily routine as far as health maintenance? And um, that will then include, of course, diet, because without diet, there's no body, because the body needs the food. And the earth is giving its own cellular components to the components of the cellular body in the being, right? So there's this interrelated relationship and there's this oneness. And so that's always there. And then when there's the specificity around a mother being pregnant, Ayurveda is always on top of it, making sure that she's doing or receiving self massages or getting abhyangas and like making sure that which I guess we'll go into like the definition of what Ayurveda considers as health. It's the one definition um, of all the definitions of basic systems that define like what is health. Most of them default to it's the absence of disease. And Ayurveda is like, that's not enough. That doesn't imply health. So through logic, Ayurveda, through yukti, logic, it's like the absence of health doesn't necessarily infer or imply that there's health. You don't know yet, but in Ayurveda, it is the most extensive of all the traditions above Chinese medicine, above like shamanistic medicine and Egyptian medicine and Greek medicine, which have a lot of their roots in Ayurveda. Shushrut, which is the father of surgery of Ayurveda, that existed around the original times of when Ayurveda was occurring. His definition, in his one main text in the first volume is samadosha, sabagnischa, samadhatu, malakriya, prasanat mendriya manaha, swasta vritti, abhidyate. So samadosha means that the doshas, the biological humors, the biological configurations of the elements that are basically case by case, because each person will be influenced by the elements in a different way, which goes into the atmaja or karmaja influence of like the formation, um, is in equilibrium, that the doshas are in a state of homeostasis within each person, right? And it's like, okay, that means things aren't going awry, things aren't creating disease, things aren't creating like chaos, things aren't creating like, long-lasting symptoms. There may be a short-term symptom, and that's because you're just adjusting the time and space, transition of season, transition of life, going from, birth to childhood, adolescence to young adulthood to seniorhood, like there's going to be little things, but as long as they don't like last or go to the next notch. So samadosha is the balance of the doshas. Sabagnischa, Agni is digestive fire. In the Vedas, Agni is also considered the god. It's the god of life.
Mm.
It's the god of transformation. So Ayurveda adapted that concept of Agni in the body because we find that without the proper transformation of food and metabolism of food and integration of food at all the levels, there will be disease, of course. So Sama means like to be with or to be in homeostasis or balanced. Um, so Samagnischa, which means like Agni is in a balanced state. So it's like, all right, so that's 2 for 2 so far. How do we know health is existing? Samadhatu, dhatu is the different tissues. There are 7 primary tissues in Ayurveda that encompass like the blood, the plasma, bone, muscle, bone marrow, etc. And it's like they're all in a state of health and well-being. You know, bones are good, you know, like muscles are good, strength is good, blood is good, immunity is good, reproductive fluids are good. Like, okay, so that's the next level of like of the definition of like health. Malakriya, the actions of the malas. Malas are the waste products. So is the person pooping and peeing and sweating properly and regularly? Pooing, peeing absolutely should be every day. There's no excuse that it should not happen every day. And then the action of sweating should happen regularly. So malakriya is the actions of the malas, that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing as is appropriate.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay. So this is how we're looking in Ayurveda for when a person's in a state of proper health. And then we can understand when those things are not in proper health, then there's not full health, right? Not to say someone's being condemned to hell with the disease process, but it's like, if you're not having this general sense of homeostasis in these fields so far mentioned, then it's not. Then you have to just keep an eye on it and just, prasanat mendriya manaha. So prasanat mendriya is the balanced activities of the indriya, which is like the senses. So the senses are not being overused, underused, or misused. They're being properly used. All the 5 senses, proper, right? Very hard in the world today when everything's very digital. We're looking at
Yes, I
computers.
was going to say that we're experiencing, and I can tell, say this as someone who's highly sensory sensitive, you know, and, and the fact that there are many people that are highly sensory sensitive says that there must be some environmental imbalance, I would imagine. This is
Yeah,
my question or hypothesis, right? That to your point, because of the sensory overload that we experience now at this point in time that hasn't existed before now, um, that there's an imbalance. But that imbalance is almost internalized as there's something wrong with the individual people.
Hmm. Yeah, and the environment again, if we go back to the Garba formation of the fetus, and they're inheriting, you know, things from the mother and the father and the rasa, which is like the nourishment of the tissues and just general nourishment. It's like there's already this inherent predisposition based on what they were doing, what they were looking at, what they were seeing, what they were feeling, what they were smelling, what they were tasting, what they were touching, right? So it's like, how far does this go? Because that will make you predisposed. In Ayurveda, the predisposition is usually called kavagunya, which is like the place where there's a space, or sometimes it's interpreted as like the defective space or the weakened space. So if someone in your family had poor vision, then the likelihood is, especially if it's mother or father, then you will maybe have that defective space or that sort of weakened space as a possibility. If you do some of the things that create a weakness in the eyes, overstraining, overlooking, misusing the senses, etc., then you'll increase the chance of that issue of the eyes, right? So this is how it's interrelated with the physiology, you know. So it's like, what are the senses exposed to on a regular basis? What are you listening to? Where do you live? Are you listening to sirens all day long? Or do you listen to trees all day long, just waving in the air as the breeze goes by? You're like, what are you hearing? This is all being interpreted because manas, which is part of that definition, is also balanced. So to be in a state of health, you have the doshas, the agni, the dhatus, the indriya, which is the senses, and the mind. Is it in a more even playing field of kindness and compassion and sensitivity and awareness and increased intelligence and all these things? Or is it chaotic and fragile and fearful and doubtful and confused and all these things? Because then that is not a complete, you know. And then and ending that swasavritti avidyate, which means like if these are all in a state of well-being, all these have to be in a state of well-being to be considered
Yes.
truly defined as properly healthy in Ayurveda. The optimal highest sense of health and well-being, all these categories have to be in a state of homeostasis.
So it's right. You're laughing because you're like, attempt that.
It's
But I
crazy.
think, right. I mean, thanks, doctor. Affirmed. I'm curious because if you could slow down and repeat them again, because I feel like this is so important to for the brain that's like, wait, I've just learned something in Sanskrit and in English, and also my brain is trying not to feel like it's breaking
Yeah,
because it's also
welcome
powerful.
to my world of studying the Sanskrit and Ayurveda and yogic sciences. It's like it hurts, but it's good. It's
Yes.
breaking to create a new form of a bigger structure that's stronger. So, yeah. So the word sama is just basically to be with, or in homeostasis, or in
Mhm.
alignment, or balance with. In Ayurveda, traditional classical Ayurvedic, doctors don't like the word balance. It's just one of those floofy words. Like, what does that really mean, balance? But we say
Mhm.
homeostasis, we say a certain level of equilibrium with or alignment with. So sama goes before these first few words. So doshas are
Mhm.
like in an integrated kind of homeostatic relationship. Agni, digestion, digestive fire, digestive metabolic transformatory capacity is in a state of well-being, that it's digesting food, you're not getting any symptoms, you're not getting gas or bloating that's inappropriate. Indigestion, you're not getting that inappropriately, you're not getting diarrhea, you're not getting constipation. Like proper Agni means like these are all working properly,
Mhm.
you know. And then the dhatus, which are the actual elements or the different systems of the body, the different components like the blood and the plasma and the muscle and bones, bone marrow, reproductive fluid, all these things are in a state of health and well-being, doing what they're supposed to do. And then the indriya, which is, the senses, the five senses. Mind is one of the pieces. It's the executive director that has to be in a state of happiness all the time. And then, for all these things to be in a state of balance, this is the proper definition of health.
Yeah.
And it's like, so if when Ayurveda says you are completely, truly healthy, that means all of these things are correct. Not just
So
one or two. It cannot be. It has to be
it's the complete.
all of these things. And there's no other system in the world that has the true definition of what health is, like to this capacity, which is
Correct.
mind-blowing and
Well,
depressing.
I mean, I'm, and then I say correct, I'm like, I imagine, but as I have not studied other medical systems, what was coming up for me was the centrality and like the ubiquity of Western allopathic medicine. And so what immediately came up for me is none of this shows up on my annual physical, right? Like none
Yeah,
of this, if right, what comes up is I'm not unhealthy or whatever the absence of disease is
yeah.
healthy,
Yeah, and
right?
you're within
Um,
range, and we know that labs, from my experience personally, and also with patients that I work with, it's often been the case that someone's come in and said, including myself, I've had labs done to look for certain things when I was having certain expressed symptoms, and the labs were like, everything looks fine, and I'm like, yeah, but there are actually symptoms. It's not even psychosomatic. Like you could see visually some of these things, and it's like the labs looked fine, and it's like, okay. Ayurveda explains why that happens too, but that's a different conversation. But briefly, it's, you know, we have a six-stage process of disease pathology or pathological formation. It's called Shed Samprapti, which is like the 60 stages of disease. And it's usually by stage three that the labs pick up things.
mhm.
But Ayurveda is
By
already
stage three,
by stage three. Yeah.
right?
Um, Stage one and two, not so much. But Ayurveda, when we do consultations and we do week to week questions or follow-ups whenever, we always ask a lot of questions and they're never just basic questions. It might sound like, okay, here's asking again about poops and this and that and the other thing. No, but it's always like um corralling the information and looking for the right little details that'll tell me where in a system that starts before the labs can pick up things.
Hmm.
Yeah, and maybe like, 20 years, Western medicine will get more advanced because it's gotten more advanced over the past 50 years, 100 years, and what it picks up in labs and things like that, you know. And so maybe it'll be close to like what Ayurveda picks up. I don't know, maybe. But, you know, Western medicine just has a different way of figuring things out to some capacity, but it's often that sometimes the labs don't pick up on things, or CAT scans might not always pick up things, and they're like, do an MRI, and if not MRI, then do this with contrast, without contrast. Like they're trying, it's like everyone's trying, and all the systems are 100% doing the best that they can, right?
Hmm.
And all the systems are not perfect. There's not, I read a is not 100% perfect either. It has its own thing. And um so and there's no system of medicine that could say they've cured death. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Not all diseases will be cured by any of the medical systems. Just because it's like, why? Ayurveda has had these conversations extensively in its earlier years of its formation through extensive question and answer with teacher and like students asking. And it's like, well, we could put that into karmaja, karmic influences, which, Western medicine doesn't really understand karma because it can't qualify it, it can't examine it, it can't test for it, it can't meet its gold standard. But Ayurveda is like, well, we can tell you this particular concept exists because of X, Y, and Z, and this is how we know it exists. And so then it's a matter of like, can the mind wrap around it? That's the thing, right? So sometimes there are things that are karma. It's like you could have two parents that are doing the best that they can with all the things that they've done with the Ayurvedic protocol, and still like the baby comes with something. Then that's the karma. And then we have to just support that. And now we just know that that's the journey that this little being has to unfold into. That's just part of the story, all these things. And so what we can do in Ayurveda is manage the health and well-being and managing like what the definition of health is through the means of like proper diet, proper lifestyle, which includes, dinacharya, which is like daily practices of waking up at a certain time, sleeping at a certain time, and then Ritucharya, which is like the seasonal practices of what you do per season. Like you put a coat on in the winter, you put shorts on in the summertime, you cover your head from the sun. During seasonal transitions, you do proper protocols to purify and cleanse the body, and so on and so forth, because that will help manage and regulate the doshas. And then also in doing that, in Ayurvedic protocols, we're also trying to address, if you're on your phone, spend a little bit less time. If you're listening to crazy music, then maybe cut down 50%. Or, like we're addressing the senses, because three other causes of disease in Ayurveda are asatmendriyartha samyoga, which means, you know, inappropriate use of the senses, misuse
Mm.
of the senses, overuse or underuse of the senses. And the senses are gathering information from the mind, and the mind is taking and running away with whatever it's gathering. And based on, you know, pre-existing inherent intelligence in the body for each person's individual journey, their mind's going to do the thing that it does because that's what was implanted into that being in that moment in time. So it's like it's going to gravitate towards certain things from history, this life or last life or whatever. And so it's not surprising if someone's affixed to certain things, and if they perpetuate that thing, then they might have issues with hearing or all these things.
So can I pause you to ask a question here?
Hmm.
Because my brain, the way that my brain is set up and oriented, is in response to the patterns and the messages that I have received in my DNA, right?
Hmm.
From my parents, from my parents' parents, from who have come before me. And I think something that you're saying right now is really sparking my curiosity around intergenerational health,
Hmm.
and that this is not something I feel like is understood well in Western allopathic medicine. And I think when I have inquired about the ways in which the patterns of let's just say of the mind, of my
Hmm.
parents' minds have
Hmm.
influenced my mind, the way that it works, I get like the blank stare, or
Hmm.
you can talk to your therapist about that. And so I
Yeah.
feel like the places where I've been able to inquire have been in spaces that focus on trauma, on intergenerational
Hmm.
trauma. And there is at least an entry way to have a conversation about epigenetics and the expression of the parent's DNA within the child's experience, in their
Hmm.
mental experience, their cognitive experience, in their brain, their
Hmm.
body mind. And because I have ADHD, um, I am mindful that um, I will hyper focus and do a deep dive and research this, and I want to lift up and pause and recognize that that is also a pattern, that, right, like ADHD is highly genetic, um, and expressed generationally and misunderstood
Hmm.
and misdiagnosed, and deeply entwined with trauma, and also more than the trauma.
Hmm.
And I'm curious how Ayurveda is thinking about this, or what's emerging for you as you're even hearing me give you a multi-part question, which is in full ADHD form.
Yeah, so I mean, to kind of rein it all in, it's understanding, from the Ayurvedic perspective that some of these labels, like Ayurveda can understand what the labels are meaning and implied from the Western side of things, but it doesn't have the all-encompassing capacity like what Ayurveda does. Um, so when someone says ADD, and then Ayurveda's like, well, how does that express for you? Like, what does that mean to you? If someone says they have trauma, they have anxiety, they have depression, like, because we're not looking just at the label, that's the door. We open a door and we're like, what are the qualities that it's expressing through? And then we start developing the means to create the right medicines in place that are the opposite qualities. And, and this isn't a place of like mental practices like meditation or yoga, and then, certain herbs that target the mind, and then also the physiology, and then we target the actual body as a whole from like treatments to the head and upper, region or quadrant of the body above the clavicles to the heart, to the body overall, and this also will work on karma. Like when we're doing deep practices like panchakarma, especially panchakarma, which are five cleansing purification uh, procedures of Ayurveda, it does also have a wide net that's casted that covers karma. And so you're pulling out a lot of things. And, there are some things, again, that if they're karmically meant to be part of your journey in this life, then they will not go away. But other things will go away. So it's just very interesting, and it's case by case. And, and then, for a bunch of karma to be done between the ages of 12 and 60. So there are five procedures that are done that could be done during those periods of time, and then what's relevant to the person. And then after 60, two of the main karmas drop off because after 60, the body is just in a different place physiologically that to put the body through that will be undue stress. And so I read it takes time into consideration. It's great if a 75-year-old feels exhilarating and feels like this high level of strength and energy. That's amazing, of course. But Ayurveda does not discount the fact that the body is still 75, right?
Mhm.
You have those beautiful pieces of like Victorian furniture that have been around for 800 years, right? Maintained well, lacquered well, just cleaned properly and, in proper environment. It's still 800 years old, right? So it's old. It's
Yes.
but old in Ayurveda doesn't imply bad like it does in the
Ah,
West.
like it does in the West. Yes, the West does
No,
not
of
like
course
old.
not. No, because these are the phases of life. It's like you can appreciate the seed that created that little 1 foot maple tree that that tree develops into 150 years of time. It's gorgeous and paramount in that environment. It's beautiful, right? But it was a little seedling. It was a cute little tree. And it's like, oh, how cute. And I was like, how gorgeous is this maple tree that's 150 years? But it's still 150 years. And it's much closer to the end of its lifespan than it was as a seedling, generally. All factors considered equal. Someone cuts the tree down at 1 foot, then that's just karma, unfortunately, or unfortunate. But nonetheless, so we look at this piece of Ayurveda where we try to maintain the senses through certain treatments and herbs and diet and daily practices. Like it's a very compounded configuration of how we maintain health every day. It's the thing that we do every day, that will slow down the progression of all diseases. And what creates the momentum, which is also not coincidental, why dosha is listed first in the definition, because in Ayurveda, the fact that it's listed first implies that this has the most importance in many ways, because doshas, when they start to go and de-escalate or escalate inappropriately, will start to affect everything else, like a domino effect. And they don't take too much to get escalated because they can escalate and change with each season and within each frame of life. So knowing like I have to maintain my doshas by understanding what my physiology is like, what my mind is like, what have I inherited, what are the tendencies, how do I do this practice every day? And daily practices of Ayurveda, dinacharya, is very important because it's the foundation for how you're going to show up to each day. you know,
Yes.
staying up late and sleeping in the next morning. Yeah, once in a blue, you can do that. It's no problem. It's not going to cause much harm to the body. Person's lifestyle that lives that way is going to have problems. And, you know, it's a matter of time, which is based on, the strength of the person's body, when that thing will manifest. It will manifest.
Yes.
But when? And how fast does it act for some versus others? It all depends on a person's diet, lifestyle, and choices that they're making in between as the bridge that creates this realization. So in Ayurveda, the daily practices are addressing the mind, the senses, the Agni, the Dhatus, the doshas, you know, because it's like, how am I waking up? How am I going to sleep? When am I eating? How much am I eating? Am I exercising? What's the quality of my sleep? What's the quality of the interactions that I have with my coworkers and classmates and family members every day? This is every day.
Yes. And it's a self-perpetuating like right self what is it? Self-perpetuating cycle. I'm not saying this correctly. Um, but essentially, right?
Self-regulating.
Self-regulating. Well, I think it's like when it perpetuates. If I am setting my intentions in the morning um to continue to maintain my dinacharya, my morning routine, my hot water as soon as I wake, scraping my tongue, taking my herbs, exercising. And I know for me, because of the way my brain is formed, right, the way that it functions, that exercise, that cardio, allows me to get the energy that I need to regulate my mood. And
Mhm,
then my meditation allows me to engage in conscious awareness of my thought patterns and not only the thoughts that are coming, but also the patterns and the waves and how I experience thought thinking
mhm,
because of the way my brain is shaped, and that I can seek balance and then continuing to move into my day following that pattern, um, paying attention to what I'm eating,
mhm,
following my protocols, knowing how my digestion is also informing my energy levels and my mental state and the
mhm,
inflammation in my joints and the aches, right? That will allow me to have the mobility to exercise, to keep the whole thing
mhm,
going.
mhm.
And also I know my brain is like, that's a lot. And and if I don't do that though, then it will be worse.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the piece that's really, you know, standing out for me is around and you spoke to this, you talked about having the compassion and this is the qualities of the mind,
Mhm,
the compassion and the connection, the ability to connect enough with yourself that you can maintain this routine.
mhm,
Um, because it is a lot. And it's essential. This also is speaking to, one of the reasons why I named this podcast Trust Your Gut
mhm,
was the double entendre, or there was the metaphor of both trusting your intuition, right? Which is the gut often is a metaphor for our intuition, our inner knowing,
mhm,
our connection also to the divine, um, to spirit
mhm,
and our natural essence. And then also your gut representing the body, the bodily system
mhm,
of digestion, which is connected to multiple organs throughout the body, but it is also the system of bodily transformation. And as you
mhm,
spoke about Agni and the god of transformation, as the god of transformation,
mhm,
I am really sitting with, um, the ability for us to be with and in relationship with our bodies as a vessel for transformation.
mhm.
And that, you know, that feels really big and like, um, feels like a big idea, but also it could feel really simple when you're thinking about what's happening with our digestion.
Mhm.
And I'm curious how you communicate this to folks, or what's coming up for you as you're connecting with people who are seeking health, and that this is truly about transformation and the body being in relationship with the body as a vessel for transformation and creation of life.
Yeah, I mean, when people are coming in and, you know, let's say like some of their issues are around digestion, they're having gas and bloating and indigestion and constipation and, peeing too much or not peeing enough, um, then and we start them on a certain protocol, and then those symptoms start to go away. It's like something's transformed, and they were accustomed to having these symptoms or didn't even think about these symptoms. And um, because then it's in Ayurveda when we're asking questions like, when do you have the gas? When do you have, you know, what's the quality? Is there a smell to it? And, when do you have it? And because this automatically is being calculated to understand like where in the body this might be coming from. So we know where to look for these things. And um, so when we start addressing these things at these certain times or whatever, and the symptoms start to resolve, then the person's free from these symptoms, that creates an awareness of like, oh, it's I'm back at this place where now I feel better. And if I eat something that's a little off and then I get the gas again, then now I know something that I ate and now I need to rectify it at the next meal or take this particular herb. Like it's the transformation that's happening in the mind with the increased awareness that helps with understanding cause and effect, and it's always cause and effect. Like if there's an effect, there has to be a cause. There's never
Hmm.
just an effect without a cause, you know. It's called karya karana in Ayurveda, so it's like the cause and effect cannot exist without each other. There has to be something to exist, and something doesn't come from nothing. Always. It's just never pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Somehow,
Yeah, it's like,
I
oh,
seem to have
it's like
this
what is that
bloat.
yeah, it's like what is that somehow? It's like we will
But
always
that
find
does happen. I will stare in the mirror and go, somehow I'm bloated. Now I have more awareness. And I'm like, well,
yeah,
actually, when you had that glass of wine,
yeah, and it's like, oh, okay, or I had the glass of wine,
cheese.
with the cheese that was combined with the meat.
What do the
And
French know that we don't know? How is it that they're living this way and we
well,
can't have wine
maybe
and
your
cheese?
homework assignment should be to research what common ailments do French people suffer from in health,
Okay,
because
thank
it's very
you.
similar in Italy. So
Ha
it's
ha.
so it's not coincidental.
Yes. And
Um,
also not a good excuse to then keep drinking that wine and eating the cheese and going, well,
yeah, yeah,
if the French can do it, but I
but
should look up the patterns is what
yeah, well,
there's
you could
something to
just
be
simply
aware of in the
Google,
environment.
you know, what are the main what are the main diseases in people in France? Is it cardiovascular? Is it dementia? Is it blood sugar issues? Like when you look it up, you'll see, and it will always connect to what's happening in diet and lifestyle. The benefit of Europe as a whole, in other countries like China and things like that, versus America, is that they are much more active in their lifestyle.
Hmm.
If they're not bicycling, they're walking, they're hiking, they're traversing thousands of steps, miles, etc. And the American is not.
That's
We have
right.
these great movements of people going to the gym, which is good. Um, but it definitely does not compare to like how physically active a person is when you're climbing up these steep streets of Tuscany. You know,
Yes.
like there's, when I was there in Tuscany and I went to this one particular town, it was very cute though. You had to actually go up this really windy road because the lift was not working that day. And it was 105 degrees and thought we were gonna die. This little 90-year-old woman is just like walking down the street from up that she's gonna have to walk up after. And she's just like, good afternoon. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
This hasn't killed you. This is great. And she wasn't even really sweating. So it was like, how lovely.
Exactly.
You know? And it's like she's been doing this for her whole life. And in the US, no. So and then you think about the constituents of the ingredients in food.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know any other country. I mean, I don't live in any other countries to see in the news, but what I've been seeing in the news for the past 8 months consistently every other day, there's some other contamination that's happened with some other things. Walnuts this week and
Yes.
past pistachios last week. And then this one particular thing from this one particular company, and then this line of food, like this lettuce and this carrot, and this, it's like it's every other week now. like some
Yes.
contamination. And then, you know, why is it that other countries have banned certain chemicals and the US has not, right? One of the chemicals I learned of that exists in like the flour here that doesn't exist in Europe is potassium bromate. That's considered a toxic chemical and causes many issues. So that flour gets produced into pasta, that flour gets produced into pizza, that flour gets produced into bread. So that potassium bromide exists in a toxic way and it's accelerated as it's cooked as a chemical reaction in the compound of a flour. Whereas in Europe, they don't put these kind of things in flour. Yeah, and
You know
that's
what
just
all
one example of a chemical. So it's like, what are you putting in your mouth?
what are you putting in your mouth consistently, even without your consent? Because
Yeah,
when you're eating right outside of your home, that you don't know. I
yeah.
I I can also hear I'm not playing devil's advocate because I don't advocate for the devil, but I can also hear many people in my life go, well, something's gonna kill you. So
Yeah, I remember when I was at pre-med in LaSalle University and I was going to lunch that one day and I couldn't make it home because I was in between exams and I had limited time. So I went to the cafeteria and I think I was taking the food to go because I was meeting my classmates for like a study session. And she put the food in a styrofoam container. And I was like, do you have non-styrofoam container? She's like, no. I was, this is a cafeteria attendant. I was like, she's like, we're gonna die of something of anyway. And I was like, of course we're gonna die. We have to die. Everything has to die. I said, but the quality of my dying is gonna be very different than the quality of your dying because I'm not gonna be falling apart at my death. And how I fall
yeah.
apart is by all this crappy stuff that I would be exposing myself to. The more you eat out, the more you get food from boxes and cans and containers that are like prepackaged and all these things, the higher the likelihood of a fast death. It's sort of like you eat fast, you die fast.
Hmm.
You eat out a lot, you will not have good health. Eating out a lot doesn't matter if it's like a five-star Michelin restaurant. Does not matter whether it's still the eating out piece. Of course, organic food's better, but it's like still eating out is not the most ideal, but versus starving, then eat out, right? It's like where's the where's the where's the there was a patient I had many years ago. He was a rheumatologist. So he was a
Hmm.
PhD. He was a medical doctor of rheumatology. He had severe rheumatic issues and spinal issues and surgery. And it's like sometimes you go into the field that you have to understand for yourself. And he was a physician, and he had a gourmet kitchen constructed in his house. He's like, he never cooked in it. He would always order food or have people deliver food, like the entire time, unless he dated someone that would cook. He never cooked. And then I taught a cooking class. This was in 2012. It was a basic cooking class. It wasn't even like typically an Ayurvedic cooking class. It was just like, let's just cook, five basic
Hmm.
recipes that are very easy for people who don't like to cook, are afraid to cook, don't know the kitchen, are afraid of the kitchen. I made some really fun recipes. And, then he felt a little inspired. He went back and he was 65, 67, and he went back and he like made a thing. And I was like, okay, it starts with that. I haven't seen it
Yes.
since. But, so it's like eating out, clearly in his case did not favor his reality, right? Because then if you're eating out and you're sick, that's worse,
That's right.
So can you eat out once in a while and treat yourself? And if you happen, and at least in the US, it doesn't happen anywhere else, you get that styrofoam container, offer it to the divine because before eating any food, you should do prayer and offer it to the spirits, the elements, the ancestors, the people that help get this food to your table no matter what. You still do the blessing and then you consume it. Just know that if you do that once, 1% of the year or less, it's not going to be catastrophic. If
Yes.
you're doing it every day, take out every day and all these things, of course. Then it's like, what are you doing?
When you are aware, right? Because I think you talked about this earlier, like we're continuing to deepen awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're continuing to deepen awareness, I think, at the same time. we are being flooded with so much information about what is healthy. And it really depends on the news outlet. It depends on, your algorithm, whatever the algorithm is for the platform that you're on and how much information you receive. If it's because even with the social, even with the search, right, you're still getting information from the algorithm.
Hmm.
And so we're flooded with so much information about what is health.
Hmm.
And it's contradictory
Hmm.
often. At least I can speak for the US, right? Like it feels very contradictory. Today, lettuce is good. Tomorrow, lettuce not so good. Romaine consistently contaminated, by the way. I don't know what's going on with that. And then romaine, suddenly the safest, healthiest lettuce you can have, right? And we know that there are food lobbies that are influencing the marketing and the ads, and we know that they're influencing government regulations. So, how do you trust your gut? How do you trust,
Yeah.
right,
Well,
what
and
you put
plus,
in your gut based off of the information that you're receiving about what is health?
yeah, especially when the gut is contaminated, especially when the mind is contaminated. You know, how often is someone really attuned to their intuition, right?
Mm.
Sometimes, it could be like a skill that a person has because since they were a child, they just had a way of gauging that in the world and it's brought them to good places. And that compass has been the thing that they didn't lose touch with, even with all these other things that are layered. That's not that common, right? Then it's the other end of the spectrum or the opposite of you have to excavate, like going through a cave mine, a coal mine, and trying to extract the diamond, right? And you get a little dirty in the process, but when you finally get like your sense attuned to like, oh, this is the inner voice, right? And in yogic and even in so in India and in Asia, practices, even Buddhism, like Tibetan Buddhism, they teach you tools to like how to like separate from the external noise to get attuned to like who you are, the essence of who you are from that place of voice and consciousness and awareness and guidance. And from Tai Chi to yoga to different breathing practices and meditative practices. And you know, these are things very specific for a mind to help cultivate so you can get connected to that essence within the heart, that is the place that will be the ruler of how you govern that day, right? But now a lot of people don't get that. Everyone's, current generations, younger generations, there's so many gamers, right?
Yes.
And then then from the gamers, you like the current younger generations are more like gamers, we'll say. And then you have, and that's a general statement. And then you have like people in their 40s and 50s that are more like not a gamer, but playing a game with the apps, whether you're like
Yes.
on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter or on TikTok or on whatever these other things are. So it's like you have gaming from one generation, you have this other distraction of apps for this other generation, you know, uh, people that are in their like 70s and 80s that are like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing with this phone thing. They're a little bit smarter in some ways, maybe. They're not as distracted by that stuff. So it's like, what do we do to release ourselves from the distractions that prevent us from really getting to know that inner like guidance or that inner intuition? Like, yeah, I should do this. No, I should do this. Because any of these things are could be like a junk food. So if you're eating junk food all the time, if you're eating out all the time, if you're eating boxed food all the time, you will not have the proper intelligence from your cells communicating. They cannot because they're murky, they're mucky, they're sludgy, they're slow, or they're frazzled, they're chaotic, they're bouncing all over the place, you know. So there's so much noise on the inner sphere of the body's geography. So it's like, what do you do? Like proper reset. Reset will consist of going away for like a 3 day silent retreat or starting to meditate once a day for 3 minutes, and changing the diet. I remember my first day of holistic class, which was my shiatsu course. The teacher had said, um, you can tell the state of health by what's in your cabinets. And
Mm,
she's like, that would be the medicine cabinet that you have. And, I thought to myself, I was like, I just finished school, undergrad, and I had my first apartment. And, the job that I was working at, I was still taking classes, just doing cool things and, all these other responsibilities that I had financially. And I was like, oh my God, can I afford to eat pretty good? I would go to the dollar store and buy, shop at the dollar store while I tried to figure it out.
hmm.
So when I took this course to start learning shiatsu and Chinese medicine, and she said that, I automatically went to the Whole Foods. So this is in Manhattan at Union Square. I walked down to Whole Foods at 9 o'clock at night because class was done, and I spent $200 on 2 bags of food.
Two
And
bags.
then,
I know it. Whole paycheck. Yep.
yep, and I brought them to I took them to the train station, got on the train, traveled 50 minutes, walked 2 blocks, opened up my cabinets, threw out what I had in my cabinets that were all filling my little cabinets, and these 2 bags filled up one cabinet. But I started there,
Yeah.
and I've not turned back. I can go to like Acme, and I'm very smart in knowing like what items to pick because I read ingredients and make sure who's doing what companies are doing what. So I know how to scrutinize. That general rule of like you shop in the periphery and you ignore everything in the middle. It's
Hmm.
mostly I respect that. Um, so it's like strategies of like how do we do smart things? So the smarter you have with the smartness you get from your food, the increased level of awareness you have, so that when you have crappy food, then you know the difference. When
Yes.
you're in a calmer state, then you know a chaotic state. Then your intuition gets more attuned to like, oh, it's a little frazzled here, and you start picking up more things in your environment more effectively and efficiently without it causing any negative impact on your psyche. You can have an awareness without the reaction.
Mm, that part is really resonating. Um, the awareness without the reaction. I think that there's so much in maintaining a healthy routine that has to do with the grounded compassion, right? The I am aware and also I don't have to react from this awareness. I don't have to leap from the judgment of I've done this again,
Hmm.
because I think that's what also can set us back from trying, right? It's the
Hmm.
opposite of a growth mindset or orientation that says every day I can try this again. I'm going to come back. And so for those of us who have cleaned our cupboards multiple times and reset
Hmm.
and said, oh, I'm going to try again, um, that there may be um, more effort that we can put into um, not reacting,
Hmm.
but maintaining compassion with the
Hmm.
awareness. That seems to be what has been most supportive for my health
Hmm.
in all of this.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's the river that we're in, right? So the current, if we're in the right river, if we've cultivated the right river, then it's taking us in our path of life in such a lighter way. Not easy, because life is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It can be easier than what it is for some people. But, when you start to make changes, because you start having the awareness of the things that cause you to get to where you are in the present moment, um, then going against that grain, that momentum is going to be hard. And you have to keep coming back to that, and eventually, even the efforts of coming back, like doing this again, trying this again, is an effort from a deeper place. Because if you keep doing it and it's not you that's doing it, something else that says, like, let's just keep coming back to this. And the judgment of not doing it right or messing up or this, that, and the other thing, doesn't really have a serving purpose. So we can let go of the idea that we should judge ourselves and just go like, all right, I'm going to do this to the best of my capacity, what I know right now can allow myself with a little bit extra effort. a little bit more like I'm gonna just push a little harder because I know for whatever reason, one person versus another will have a little bit more of a difficult time because of their own mindset, like to really dedicate or be disciplined, you know. It's like you
Yes.
want to, but you want to gauge that and invest in that to the degree that you're trying to oppose the force of becoming ill.
Mm,
So it's like, how much do you want to really oppose illness by doing those things that might seem like a little bit of work, you know? It's like I never really liked going to the gym. I mean, my physical activity has always been yoga and like doing some hiking and walking and manual labor here and there. The gym is one of the things that's like, you know, and it's like, but in my decades of going to the gym on and off, like I keep coming back to it.
yes. Yes.
And so I'm like, I might be getting to the place, like I could see my mind go, oh, but the bed feels so much comfortable. And I'm like, I
Yes.
know, but if I stay in 3 minutes longer, then I will miss the window of when I can go to when I can do this to when I can come back to when I can see patients, da, 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 da. So it's either I do that and skip, you know, like screw up not going to work or screw not going to the gym and then do work and it's like, oh, I'll just try the gym again tomorrow, like, or just that awareness of the thought going, yeah, I don't want to go, but I'm going anyways.
Hmm.
And when you do that enough, what will usually happen is that thought of not wanting to go will be replaced by like, yeah, I'm getting up and I'm going. What seems like a lot of work in daily practices of getting up, brushing your teeth, tongue scraping, drinking the hot water, da 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 da, will become second nature that when you don't have it, the absence of it will imply something that your body is like, wait, I'm missing something today.
I need that. Yes. I just want to affirm how much this resonates with me. The awareness of the thinking about my lack of motivation. Um, and letting that thought float. I think that feels
Mhm.
like something that I've been in an unconscious practice with or trying, and you just named and articulated what's happening because I'm aware of, again, using the label of ADHD. I think what has been really helpful for me in
Mhm.
understanding my brain
Mhm.
is knowing that my brain um is uh it is designed to focus on what it wants to focus on, right?
Mhm.
And so motivation for me can be very hard. But when I am motivated, I could have a flood of energy. And so finding the ways that I can balance this, or in some ways gamify or trick my brain into seeing reward, um, can be really helpful. But I
Mhm.
think the mindfulness, right? So rather than just saying, okay, I got to find a way to attach some form of dopamine to getting myself out of the bed to
Mhm.
get to exercise. I know if it's warm outside, I can't wait to go outside. If the sun is outside, I can't
Mhm.
wait to go outside. If it's beautiful, if I'm running in nature, if I'm moving in nature, I can't wait. Let it be dark, let it be cold, let it be
Mhm.
raining, let me be just a little bit more tired
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and I cannot activate it. But the awareness of those thoughts and knowing I can also shift
Yeah.
is the practice for me.
Yeah.
And that takes some of the edge off and it shifts, it creates more balance. And so I really appreciate you naming that.
Yeah. And the body, which like the body and its organs, physical structures encompass the brain, but mind is not limited to the brain. Mind
Mm-hmm.
is not only in the brain. Mind is in the entire body and every cell throughout the being, through every single nook and cranny, end to end. So mind is not limited to the brain. So for addressing body through structural treatments of diet, lifestyle, like actual treatments like oil therapies or whatever, and then cleanse protocols, purging protocols, you're helping work with the systems and the organs the mind, will be affected by this for sure. And the mind will also be affected by like meditative practices, yoga practices, and always remembering like the mind is not limited to the body, it's not in the brain. And so it has its own specific line of treatment and medicine that requires consistency too. It has to take its pill every day. And
Yes.
and its pill is like this continued effort and focus on like I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. Just make an effort, just try every day, just try every day. Let's do this every day. And kind of seeing the mind for what it is, but also knowing that the mind is affected by what happens in the chemical reactions of the body. So if there's obstruction in certain cells and organs and they're not communicating properly, then this is going to ripple through the bloodstream and all these things. And then it's going to translate also to the brain and mind and all of these things. And, you know, um, knowing that that has to be cleared out, that will create more space. And then the body will reintegrate, not even just integrate, reintegrate properly. And then there'll be an increased level of awareness and cause and effect and reactions will be more narrowed over time. And that's
Yes.
what we can hope for. We can't hope to get a gold medal just because we're like, I want to run. You know,
Yes.
I'm going to start running today for the first time ever, and I'm going to be able to run to the Olympics by the end of the month. No, that takes decades, if not at least 10, 15 years, you know, and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to wait 10, 15 years. I just want that super thing now, you know.
Yes.
And that's the mind. That's the aspect of the mind that's unruly that has to just be brought back to like, what am I going to do every day towards that goal, knowing that that goal will come to fruition one day and I will look back and go, it's like when you start school, when you start grad school or undergrad school, like I want my PhD tomorrow. You're like, I want my PhD. It's going to have this windy direction and we'll end up there. It's going to be a painful process along the way, but you still have assignments to complete, papers to present, and theses to, discuss and debate and all these things. And then eventually it's like, oh yeah, I'm at the other end of this 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, depending on your trajectory later, right? And it's like, but you did not go every day. Maybe that once in a while you were like, screw today. I'm just gonna sleep. I'm just not gonna do this and do
Hmm.
that. And that's fine because in that 2, 3 year period, you still completed the PhD. And it's like, okay, that's fine. You had a moment, but you kept focusing on like, I'm going to do this a little bit every day, and as long as you're doing that a little bit every day, the goal will be reached at some point.
Yes. Well, this
But it
is,
all starts with the little things that you have to do today, which can seem like a daunting task and overwhelming and like, oh my God, I have to do this and do that. So, in Ayurveda, we try to ease some people into like daily practices. And we're always learning too. So we might give a suggestion for like a certain oil or a certain medicine. Um, and you're like, oh no, I had this reaction to this particular medicine. This is a failure. And I read it's like, no, it actually gives me information to know, all right, was that ideal? Of course not. But it is not a bad deal because now I get to have a different understanding of what your body is really doing. And so the next medicine will be a better one in place. So don't be afraid to go through that first line of like fire because most times it's like right on. Sometimes you're like, that didn't work. Interesting. That produced that response. Okay. And some people might get afraid very, very quickly, like, oh no, this is not, no, I'm afraid. Yeah, that's mind. That is really the mind. You didn't die. It didn't hospitalize you. You didn't require like surgery. It's just a minor discomfort. We don't know how to handle discomfort in this country because we're taking painkillers
yes.
of all
Yes.
sorts, from
Yes.
alcohol to gambling to overeating to the over-the-counter, Motrin to, heroin, meth, oxycodone, you know, because we're trying not to feel this pain, rather than be a culture of learning how to deal with pain properly.
Yes. I think that is a great place for us to wrap up. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, yeah, it's a potent and important invitation for us to be in a practice of witnessing and being aware of how we relate to pain and how we um, evaluate wellness, health, and how that can shift and change, and we can embody that change.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious if you have any final reflections or thoughts that you would like to share for today.
I would share that this is a great time, although any moment is a great time to start working with someone that's clinically trained in Ayurveda to help sort of reset where you're at in the present moment, to work on some of the historical content so that you can get closer to a place of better feeling, well-being, awareness, like more contentment in the life. Um, and so whether it's any moment throughout the year, or especially these moments when there's like a cleansing transitionary period that protocols are done, you know, just start now. Don't wait till tomorrow because
Hmm.
you don't know. But
That's
you wait till tomorrow, you lost today. So if you can
yes,
start now, the next meal, like, okay, I'm going to think differently, or I'm going to, start thinking about this and then start changing something. Just start now. You know, don't wait to start now.
yes. Don't wait to start now. Um, on the path to health. I want to thank you, Dr. A. Antonio Aragona from Still Point Ayurveda. You can find Dr. A at stillpointayurveda.com.
Yes.
And we are excited to continue our conversation series. I look forward to talking with you more about the wisdom of Ayurveda as the science of life next time with Trust Your Gut.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome.